everyone. My name is Hana. I'm half French and half Indonesian, but I grew up in the United States and South Africa. Now I'm in the Netherlands where I just finished my master's degree in international relations. Last week, I participated in PSCORE's Model UNSF Conference, specifically in Strategic Priority Group 1, which focused on food and nutritional security in the DPRK. As a resident coordinator, my main responsibilities were to update the UN and the DPRK's progress in improving food and nutritional security, particularly in reference to SDG 2, which is related to ending hunger, and SDG 9, which is related to improving infrastructural resilience. During the conference itself, my main responsibility was to make sure that delegates had equal opportunities to contribute to our final working paper, which is the solutions that we had to tackle this issue. Our final working paper aimed to improve the DPRK's food and nutritional security in 7 main ways. The first being that we wanted to target vulnerable groups such as children through an equal distribution of the public distribution system in North Korea's food rations, and to increase nutritional intake, which would prevent and treat stunting in children. Secondly, we wanted to increase the resilience, sustainability, and self-sufficiency in the agricultural sector. For example, through improving the management of livestock. Third, we wanted to enhance disaster risk management since the DPRK faces many natural disasters, which impacts their crop yields. Fourth, we wanted to increase control over disease transmission. Fifth, we wanted to provide resources, inputs, and knowledge in the agricultural sector. Sixth, we wanted to increase the capacity for production through arable land, which we looked specifically at tide reclamation in the DPRK. Finally, we wanted to improve data sharing and data collection in the DPRK to better address these issues. We had several important discussions during the conference related to UN funding of these objectives, since many humanitarian objectives in general in the DPRK are severely underfunded. Second, the prioritization of women and children and improving food and nutritional security, since they are 2 of the most vulnerable groups in the DPRK to malnutrition. We also wanted to improve WASH services, so water and hygiene services. We also looked at environmental protection and arable land. And finally, we looked at how to diversify the diets of people in the DPRK. We had several important outcomes in our working paper. The first is that we encouraged the United Nations and other donors to increase funding to achieve these goals. We also agreed to increase the provision of therapeutic food, to increase the provision of COVID vaccines, since this is one of the big challenges in improving the situation in DPRK, is that the borders are closed due to the COVID pandemic. We also agreed to provide more industrial technologies to improve crop production in the DPRK. Specifically related to tide reclamation, we took on this suggestion because this would increase the amount of arable land in the DPRK, which would then increase the amount of crops and harvests that would be possible. We also specifically looked at the DPRK's extreme weather conditions and disasters, since these have historically impacted the DPRK and their crop production. We also suggested ways that soil erosion during these disasters and weather conditions could be prevented through using specific types of plants. And we addressed the UN's prioritization of women and children in improving food security. We suggested different ways that diets could be diversified, for example, reintroducing the 1 egg per day diet, in which women and children have to eat at least 1 egg per day for protein. And we looked at setting up safe spaces for women so that there is some kind of nutrition center where they are guaranteed access to food. And finally, we also proposed solutions to improve the DPRK's drinking water, to combat infectious diseases in the DPRK, and improve data collection in the country related to these priorities. So as you can see, in just a few days, we tackled many complex and interconnected issues related to Strategic Focus Group 1. Thank you for listening.
My name is Joyce Bibelan and I am from the Philippines. So during the Model UNSF Conference 2022, I was assigned to become the resident coordinator of the Strategic Priority 2, which mainly tackles about the social development services, and it focuses on 3 sustainable development goals. First is the SDG 3, that is about ensuring healthy lives and promoting well-being for all at all ages. Second is the SDG 4, that is about ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education, and it is also about promoting lifelong learning. And lastly, it also involves SDG 6, that is about ensuring availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. So now let's proceed to what are the main functions or the very purpose of a resident coordinator, not only during the conference but the entirety of its existence. So basically, a resident coordinator represents the United Nations at the highest level of state, and together with the relevant UN bodies representative, it involves fostering engagement with the government, civil society, bilateral and multilateral partners, academia, and even the private sector in order for the UN strategic framework to help address the country's needs. And in the time of the conference, it's about the needs, priorities, and challenges of DPRK so as to fulfill the Sustainable Development Goals, or for short, what we call the SDGs. On each SDG or Sustainable Development Goals. So basically, in a nutshell, during the very first day of the conference, on the SDG 3, that is about ensuring healthy lives and promoting well-being, it was discussed upon between the delegates of the DPRK and the World Health Organization, or WHO, that the combination of both traditional or Korean medicine together with Western medicine is that it should be maintained well, so that to increase the quality of the medical system and medical delivery systems, despite of the fact that DPRK is already facing major obstacles due to the sanctions on imports. And as for the SDG 4, that is about ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education, the responsible person or the responsible delegations under this intelligent and outstanding resolutions is under the hands of the delegate from the UNICEF. And through the delegate, a practical education to be reinforced for everyone was thought of so it can build an advanced nation. The implementation of higher education structural reform has to be carried out in a direction with courses on subjects that would focus on information security, robotics, and engineering. And last but not the least is the SDG 6. So the primary and secondary delegations that were responsible in coming up with these resolutions were the delegations from the WFP or World Food Program, the UNDP or the United Nations Development Program, and lastly the UNICEF. So they were able to come up with the implementation of the collection and disposal system of household and industrial wastewater, so that in 2030, the government would ensure a better administration of water used in farming methods and industrial sector. Those were the discussions during the first, second, and third day conference, but how about were the coherent and solid outcomes from these discussions? The fruitful discourse were able to branch out into those 3. First of all is that the team were able to come up with crafting a river basin development master plan and roadmaps that are specifically developed for flood and disaster risk reduction and management. Second is that the Strategic Priority 2 was also able to formulate and implement an efficient promotion of good hygiene practices at household and institutional levels, which would be possible through active collaboration involving the society through the campaigns. with possible partnerships. And lastly, the team were also able to design and implement hygiene education and behavior change communication strategies to address risk hygiene behaviors, which helped them strengthen the resilience of communities to cope with emergencies with the campaigns. On behalf of the strategic priority 2, we can definitely all agree and come up to terms that the entire experience at Model UNSF Conference 2022 is absolutely life-changing and an eye-opener to each and every one of us. Why is that? It is because of the fact that due to the emerging COVID-19 pandemic response issues and the issues as to trade and globalization, we tend to forget that there are also impending issues that we tend to forget and neglect, and that has to do with the rampant issues still affecting the citizens of DPRK. And as for my case, as the resident coordinator, I describe the entire experience similar to a roller coaster ride, because when you're already reaching the top peaks of the ride, you have to really be resilient all throughout the conference for you to come up with a better resolution.
Hello everyone, I'm Sujin Kim from South Korea. It was my great pleasure to have served as the resident coordinator of Resilience and Sustainability Group at the Model United Nations Strategic Framework Conference organized by PSCORE. The resident coordinator is the highest ranking representative of the United Nations development system at the country level, with the responsibility to lead United Nations country teams. To ensure my duty as the resident coordinator is fulfilled, I actively led the conference by coordinating delegate support to the DPRK in their implementation of the 2030 Agenda. The Strategic Focus Group 3 mainly involved resilience and sustainability, which integrate the interrelated strands of the UN's work in the DPRK. These are A. Ecosystem management, B. Climate change adaptation and mitigation, C. Disaster risk management, including risk reduction and preparedness. The related SDGs are SDGs 7, 11, 12, 13, and 15. Prior to the conference, all delegations had to submit documents, which are position and policy paper for delegates, and update to strategic priority for the resident coordinators to demonstrate rigorous analysis and insightful solutions. We also held a series of orientations to learn about rules of procedures, negotiation skills, and responsibilities of delegates and resident coordinators. It's also known as the General Speakers List, which is conducted during the General Assembly. During these consultations, all delegations could deliver speeches in alphabetical order based on their delegation names. Therefore, delegates could reiterate their respective positions that were also expressed in their position and policy papers, whereas the resident coordinators yielded to a heightened understanding of the possible scopes for negotiation among the delegates. During this time, delegations could speak to each other freely, as formal rules of procedures were suspended. This time was used to mainly discuss and debate the contents of the draft proposal. As the resident coordinator, I ensured that all the delegates' voices were heard and acknowledged. I have also assigned the equal work to everyone so that there is no free rider in drafting our working paper. Hence, delegates demonstrated their active participation in their quest to finalize the contents. In detail, the Strategic Focus 3 seek to empower communities to become resilient and sustainable in their approach to agriculture and climate change, and to secure ecosystems and sustainable energy for all. To give a final remark, I'm sure that this was a fruitful learning process for everyone, and I would like to express my gratitude to the PSCORE team for organizing such a great conference. Thank you.
Greetings everyone. My name is Saad Hamid and I am from Pakistan, and I was the resident coordinator of the Strategic Priority 4 Data and Human Rights Development at the Model United Nations Strategic Framework Conference 2022, also known as Model UNSF 2022. The agenda of the conference was the DPRK UN Strategic Framework. The DPRK UN Strategic Framework is a strategic framework on which both DPRK and UN agreed, and they set the priorities for the UN country levels work in the DPRK over the 5 years time span. There are 4 strategic priorities, and the strategic priority 4, data and human rights development, focuses on the 2 Sustainable Development Goals, SDG 16, peace, justice and strong institutions, and SDG 17, partnerships for the goal. And the strategic priority 4 also follows a human rights based approach that is so much important in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals in the DPRK. Data collection, cooperation and transparency are also included in the strategic priority 4. As the resident coordinator, I was fully aware of the scope of the agenda, and the role of the resident coordinator was that I was just like a moderator and facilitator during informal consultations. I tried to ensure that all the delegates were heard irrespective of their portfolios. Furthermore, as resident coordinator, I have tried to rigorously analyze and evaluate the performance of my strategic priority group and ensure that we cover all subtopics of the agenda in our priority group discussions and in our final proposal. In addition, I worked with my fellow resident coordinator of other strategic priority groups to make sure all the groups were working well. In our strategic priority group, there was a wide range of discussions that took place from the border openings of the DPRK to the human rights situation in the DPRK. All the delegates were very active and cooperative, and they tried to find common grounds only for the welfare of the DPRK nation. And as a result of these discussions, we came up with a comprehensive proposal that covered every part of our agenda, from data collection to IT infrastructure, from human rights to transparency, from cooperation to training programs. Our priority group ensured that we include each subtopic of our agenda. Our strategic priority group working paper was all encompassing, and I am so happy that our proposal got acceptance in the voting, and it was only because of the efforts and the hard work of the delegates. And at the last, I would like to share my experience. It was such an incredible experience. The conference was quite well organized. I really enjoyed it. All the training sessions and the 3 days conference were great. The defector sessions and the feedback from the secretariat and the chair helped me and the delegates out. All the members of the secretariat team and the management team were very helpful, especially the chairs and the tech team. All the delegates were so cooperative and well prepared. It was quite an honor for me to be a part of this conference. I would like to reiterate once again that it was such a wonderful experience. Thank you very much.